Story 1. I was born in the Soviet Union. I can provide a brief perspective on what happens to education under authoritarian regimes. Some aspects will remain intact while others will not. The main dividing line will be whether a particular subject challenges an ideology. This means most of the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields will be relatively unharmed, with some exceptions. After all, they help train useful workers and manufacture weapons. Humanities, on the other hand, will be severely impacted. These subjects promote lateral thinking, which is discouraged. Fields such as psychology, the arts, sociology, and history will be replaced with highly ideological curricula that lack genuine scientific knowledge. Even advanced classes will struggle to provide proper education in the humanities since it is impossible to completely segregate their learning. Some natural sciences will also be affected if they contradict the party line. For example, biology can be a sensitive topic, as seen in the case of academic Nikolai Vavilov, whose legacy we still benefit from today. In the United States, paleontology and geology may quickly decline in quality, along with meteorology. While these subjects may still be taught, the content will not reflect the forefront of human knowledge, and some information may be outright absurd. Protests will not occur. Protesters will be threatened with expulsion from university, and leaders will be prosecuted. Supporters of the regime will be placed in every student organization to control and monitor activities. Lucrative career incentives will be offered to those who support the regime, creating fierce competition for these positions. They will have titles like head of student committee, filled by candidates who are democratically elected by the student body. However, the same favored individuals will consistently emerge victorious. Given enough time, the situation will normalize, and people will forget the value of humanities education, feeling satisfied with practical education that leads to solid jobs in tangible sectors. This may take a couple of decades. I hope this helps. Story 2. ICE also threatened to arrest his wife, who is a U.S. citizen and 8 months pregnant. Criticism of a country's actions and concern for civilians does not equate to supporting terrorism. Story 3. My initial thought upon reading the news is that the Trump administration is starting to arrest dissidents now. Another mark on the slide into autocracy. Story 4. If our courts uphold the law, he won't face deportation, given he has only used the First Amendment. However, that assumes the court will uphold the law, and it is uncertain if it will. Story 5. I don't understand the implications for the Ivy League and higher education. Khalil had already graduated but continued participating in campus protests. More concerning than the recent $400 million in grant cuts at Columbia, I suspect this will have a larger chilling effect on pro-Palestinian speech at universities. Institutions will be quicker to involve law enforcement. Story 6. They are locking people up for much less. A British woman is jailed by Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Washington state for having a visa issue at the border. A German woman is detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement in California for having her tattoo tools with her while in transit. This issue is more serious than just one case. Story 7. Reading these comments reinforces that the United States is in a precarious situation. I hope I can get my assets out of the country before everything collapses. Story 8. It is absolutely despicable. Every repulsive fraud that pretended to care about campus free speech, like Ben Shapiro, Bari Weiss, or Dave Rubin, is celebrating this flagrant crackdown. Both Republicans and Democrats will disregard the First Amendment for Israel. Story 9-1. Ivy League colleges have capitulated prematurely to protect their assets. They exist to protect and grow their resources. Higher education has become a side hustle. Revocation of a green card is a step before the revocation of citizenship. Could happen to you next. The Anti-Defamation League supporting the revocation of Mahmoud Khalil's green card suggests they have forgotten Jewish history. Do they not remember what happened when a tyrant revoked Jewish citizenship? That reflects a negative attitude. Story 10. Brain drain occurs as every self-respecting high-level academic begins to make plans to move to a country that will not infringe on freedoms. Story 11. I think it is concerning when the state removes people from college campuses for political speech. I would like everyone who claimed that asking professors to use the correct pronouns for their students was a sign of authoritarianism and a threat to free expression on campus to admit they were wrong. They, knowingly or not, contributed to this situation. I am also considering sending back my diploma. Story 12. Every level of authority, from federal immigration and customs enforcement officers to New York State and New York City officials, as well as Columbia University, has failed in their duty to uphold and enforce the law faithfully. If we do not call on elected officials to put a stop to this now, we risk being the next individuals to disappear off the streets. Maybe it won't happen to you. Maybe it will. It is better not to find out. Don't let the leopard eat your face. Story 13. One aspect of taking action that has consequences is that people are generally aware of those consequences in advance. Story 14. I'm torn on the recent arrest of Mahmoud Khalil at Columbia University. On one hand, freedom of speech is crucial, especially in academic settings. Universities should be places where people can express controversial opinions without fear of government retaliation. On the other hand, recent campus protests have gone beyond speech. Many have led to property destruction, class disruptions, and even instances of students feeling unsafe. Speech rights do not extend to interfering with teaching, vandalizing property, or creating hostile environments on campuses. There is also the question of ideology. Jihadist movements, for example, openly celebrate the events of September 11th and label the United States as the Big Satan. Supporting an event like September 11th arguably goes beyond free speech and into endorsing violence. Khalil's arrest raises significant questions. 1. Where do we draw the line between free speech and harmful activism? Should universities be responsible for regulating speech that leans toward extremism? Does this set a precedent where federal agencies intervene more aggressively on college campuses? If someone openly supports Hamas and disrupts order by promoting ideas that are fundamentally opposed to American values, should we allow such a person to immigrate? I would love to hear other perspectives. Do you think this was justified? Or is it government overreach? Story 15. I agree with the decision to revoke the green card and deport a lawful resident for any criminal activity. It is not fair to characterize his actions as protesting, trespassing on property for weeks, threatening and intimidating others, and requiring large amounts of police resources that could be used to prevent crimes like domestic violence is unacceptable. Goodbye, Mr. Mahmoud. He should be given a one-way ticket to the country of which he is a citizen as a gesture from the citizens of the United States. Story 16. Going to receive negative votes for this, but putting it out there anyway. Do not protest while on any kind of visa, especially a student visa. Even permanent residents are vulnerable. Ask those Cubans who obtained status as refugees and are currently being deported for visiting Cuba, which makes their entire residency application fraudulent. Do not engage in any actions that could be considered visa fraud. Facts. A student visa allows a foreigner guest access into a country for the purpose of studying. The U.S. student visa comes with many conditions, including not interfering in the country's politics and not supporting terrorists. If anyone fails to adhere to those conditions, the visa and their guest access can be removed at any time. Non-resident alien guests, legal or not, do not have the same rights as citizens. No other country looks kindly on foreigners interfering in their politics or elections. If a foreigner is in the United States to study, they should focus on their education and not risk losing their visa status by participating in any protests. The foreigner has much more to lose, including their education and residency status. They should not waste the financial support of whoever is funding their higher education. They can complain about their ideology, but this will not change the current administration's stance. Immigration has many rules, and they will find a reason to rescind the visa and deport any foreigner interfering in U.S. politics. Do not give them this reason, or you are setting yourself up for serious consequences. The U.S. government can entangle them in bureaucratic processes indefinitely, as they have more resources than someone who may face thousands of dollars in immigration attorney fees to avoid deportation. Even if the person is a permanent resident, there are still conditions they may have violated. They should have started a fundraising campaign yesterday. Seriously, Anyone on a student visa to study should focus on their studies and keep their visa status legal. No one will have an issue with this. If a foreigner wants to protest, they should do it in their own country. There are enough people in the US who believe the Palestine protesters cost a political figure the election, and who dislike any and all protesters for interfering in US politics, leading to numerous posts online blaming the uncommitted movement. Story 17. An Israeli student received $400,000 from Columbia University due to a wrongful suspension after spraying protesters with a foul spray, which led to some requiring hospitalization. Additionally, pro-Zionist groups attacked student encampments at UCLA. The concerns about protecting Jewish students are misplaced, particularly since many of those harmed in these incidents are Jewish but do not identify as Zionists. Meanwhile, those who commit actual acts of violence on campus and in Palestine seem to be rewarded and shielded from consequences. Story 18. You can help with minimal effort by signing this petition demanding the release of Mahmoud Khalil, a student and advocate for Palestine. It's approaching 2 million signatures. Story 19. Trespass is illegal. That alone is enough to get a person arrested. The rest will be revealed through the process. If there's no reason to hold him, he'll be released. He has a history of criminal behavior, including harassment, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and obstruction. If he received leniency before, he is less likely to receive it this time. Additionally, he is not a student. He was expelled 2 years ago after assaulting someone on campus. He is certainly not a student at the women's college where this latest arrest happened. Story 20. It is not right that a student would choose to insult the reputation of his fellow classmates and the country by protesting and disobeying the authorities and the law instead of focusing on his studies. I can only feel bad for his parents. His actions bring shame to the sacrifices they made. He has abandoned his focus on studies in favor of causing trouble. His parents must be so disappointed in their bright young son who formerly attended a top university. Story 21. I could count on one hand the number of jobs that I wouldn't take to avoid being a higher education administrator right now. There is genuinely no way to make anybody happy, and the only safe recourse is to issue vague statements about reviewing the current landscape and upholding institutional values. At this point, and this may be controversial, I think a lot of anger towards deans and institutions that are issuing these vague statements is misdirected. Students are paying these institutions for a service, education. These services cannot exist without catering to the will of those that fund them, especially the government, and students will be significantly affected if an institution is targeted and depleted. In summary, I believe that much of the anger towards deans and administrators is misdirected. The focus should be on the Department of Education and the executive branch. I am usually the last to defend higher education positions as I hear more about problems and corruption than positive impacts. But in this case, what choice do they really have? Story 22. These protests did very little to help the Palestinians but significantly disrupted life on campus and made Jewish students feel unwelcome, regardless of their views on the conflict in Gaza. Now, the United States government is threatening to withhold $400 million in research funding, and Columbia University is the primary focus of the current administration's efforts on this issue, which may cause great disruption to the institution. If a foreign national is leading these highly destructive protests, the United States has the right to deport that individual, if there is a legal framework for doing so. Story 23. I think it's great that my Jewish brothers and sisters, as well as non-protesting students, might be able to attend classes without people calling them derogatory names and disrupting their education. You want to protest? Fine. You want to shut down your entire college for your protest? Not acceptable. Story 24. I am glad to see that sympathizers of terrorism are finally being addressed. Many of these student organizations have explicit support from nations that sponsor terrorism, taking advantage of Western compassion to spread their agendas to vulnerable individuals. We must never forget the paradox of tolerance. Story 25. I attended a liberal college where a significant portion of my friend circle came from Jewish backgrounds. We engaged in numerous debates about the Israel-Palestine conflict, particularly before 2020, which included some extreme viewpoints. However, I have never witnessed any debate that approached anti-Semitism. It frustrates me when people view Jews as a special race that inherently generates wealth. We are all human beings, and sometimes circumstances favor certain groups more than others. There are both impoverished Jews and billionaires. The discourse surrounding anti-Semitism resembles how the right discusses the Black Lives Matter movement, with many using it as a means to signal virtue while attempting to eliminate leftist influence in colleges under the pretense of protecting Jewish individuals. I admit I feel somewhat smug, as the opposite situation occurred in 2020, where any rational discussion was labeled racist and the Black Lives Matter movement had a cult-like presence on campus. Now, in 2025, the pendulum has swung back, resulting in equally absurd situations. I am genuinely disheartened by our society and sometimes wonder if we would be better off as mostly independent states rather than one unified country. Story 26. To directly answer the question, it means that universities will be more proactive in warning students attending on visas about the possible consequences of engaging in speech that supports the goals of terrorist organizations. There will be a more explicit warning about the difference between being a full citizen entitled to do things like advocate for the violent overthrow of the United States in the abstract, which is protected by the First Amendment, and being a non-citizen present subject to the terms of a visa that restrict some rights as a condition of the visa. Columbia University essentially set Khalil up as a fall guy for the demonstrations last year, and he took the bait by continuing to demonstrate this year and making it more intense. Columbia should have never conveyed the idea that encampments and violent takeovers of university property were considered free speech. Those actions were always separate from protected speech. Columbia has no authority to override federal laws. Students who believed that the Columbia Quad was a foreign embassy where U.S. law does not apply were misled by Columbia's tacit support of their lawbreaking. The city also misled the students. Normally, when 100 police officers need to respond in the middle of the night to storm a building in riot gear and arrest dozens of people for criminal trespass, the district attorney does not simply drop charges and let everyone go home. If 100 police officers invest an entire evening responding to a situation, one should expect to see a courtroom. However, Columbia's influence spared these students from even a summons, which conveyed the idea that Columbia can protect students from the law. Cannot. I assume the protests will continue without the participation of non-citizen students present on visas. I expect the protests will move away from the violence of occupying buildings and quads, distancing themselves from sloganeering and instead focusing on coalition building and rational argument or debate. This may de-radicalize the pro-Palestinian movement and make it stronger, or it may end the movement altogether. It depends on how reliant that movement was on non-citizen participation, as that is likely to decrease quickly. Story 27. It's an affront to democracy that it has gone this far. Free speech is not just a right. It is a privilege that we enjoy. Do not jeopardize a good thing for everyone by abusing that privilege and instigating violence against a minority. I will not shed a tear for deporting that hate-monger any more than I would be upset over David Duke being thrown out of the country. Even then, that individual is still a citizen while Khalil is not. In my opinion, Khalil can be disregarded, along with my alma mater. Story 28. It is troubling that he is being arrested for protesting, which reflects on the direction the United States is heading. I cannot imagine how 4 years of this situation will not leave some irreversible marks on the country. That said, he is a supporter of a terrorist organization. Regardless of how one may try to soften the impact, Hamas is a terrorist organization. This fact does not diminish how terrible it is that he is being arrested for expressing his opinions, but I think it is worth mentioning due to the imbalanced perspective on what he supports. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.